All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about some of the operations that go with polynomial expressions, specifically looking at adding and subtracting. So anytime we're adding or subtracting polynomial expressions, I often hear this phrase, to combine like terms. But when we say that, what do we actually mean? So the first thing to do is define what it means by like terms. So a like term are any terms that have the same variable with the same exponent. So my example here is our 2x squared, 5x squared, negative 6x squared, negative 8x squared. All of these have an x squared on them, so not just x, not just something squared, very specifically an x squared. When we are combining these like terms, we're just adding the coefficients. What we're actually saying is just how many of them do we have. So the example, again, if I had 2x squared plus 5x squared, I'm just saying how many x squares do I have? Well, 2 and 5 gives me 7 x squares. So that's all we mean by combining like terms, is define which terms are the same, and we say that by once again, their variable and exponent, and then just add those coefficients together. How many total do you actually have? And that's all that adding polynomials really is. Often you'll see it like this with the parentheses around it. That's just showing you your two different polynomials, but because you're adding, all you're doing is combining those like terms. So for me, I really like to use colors to help me organize, and I go through and I find my like terms first. I also personally like to go in standard form, so I'm going to start with my largest. I see that I have x to the fourth here and here, so those are going to be the same. I'm going to keep going. Do I have anything that's cubed? I do right here. Then I'm going to say, do I have anything that is squared? I have a squared one here and a squared one here, so I'm going to take those. Next, do I have anything, oops, I forgot to put a spot for it. Do I have anything that's linear, so just an x? I do here. And then last but not least, do I have anything that's just a constant? I do here. So now I've identified all of my different like terms, and I want to make sure that I can just go ahead and combine them. And so my greens for my x to the fourth, I have 5 and 3. That gives me 8 x to the fourth. My blue, which is a negative x cubed. I had 2 yellows. Those were my squared. So 4 and 6 gives me 10. I just had 1 here. It's a negative squared, nothing to add with the 2. So that would give you my final answer, 8x to the fourth minus x cubed plus 10x squared minus x plus 2. So when we say to add polynomials, that's all we're doing is finding those like terms and combining them. Subtracting is very, very similar. There's just this extra step here. And this extra step has to do with the fact that we have a negative. And so what we're really doing is we're saying it's all of this minus all of that. So some people like to just take each of these and then actually write them out. So example, 12x cubed minus negative 18x cubed. When we do that, we see that's really 12x cubed plus 18x cubed, which gives us 30x cubed. That takes a little bit longer to do, and it also takes a little bit more brain power. You have to write it all down and make sure that you're subtracting every single time. So the way that I like to handle it is just adding one extra step to the very beginning, which is to distribute that negative. And that means we're going to take the negative to every single thing in the parentheses behind it, every single term. What that really means is the sign of every term in the polynomial behind the negative switches. So my first one didn't change. It's still 12x cubed plus 5x minus 8x squared plus 19. Now each of these is going to be different. It's going to be minus 6x squared plus 9x minus 3 plus 18x cubed. By doing this first step, I've taken into consideration the negative for everything beneath it. Now all we have to do is combine like terms. So I have an x cubed and an x cubed. That gives me, like I said, 30x cubed. I have an x squared and an x squared. That gives me negative 14x squared. I have a 5x and a 9x, and that gives me 14x. And then I have a 19 and a negative 3, and that gives me 16. So that is how you can handle subtracting. It's still combining like terms. Just take the moment to distribute the negative, which means changing the sign of everything in the parentheses behind it. I will say most people forget this very first term, so please make sure to note that it does go to the very first one as well. It goes to every single term. Each of those signs will change.